I'm going to introduce our next entrepreneur. It's Zach Sekar, which I'm sure I'm also not pronouncing right. He's the co-founder and CEO of Polar Extracts. It's a B2B cannabinoid manufacturing technology startup based in LA. Zach is an experienced community builder and also founded Startup Coil, as well as several conference series, including LA Joint Ventures, LA Tech Happy Hour, and more. Welcome, Zach.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah. And also, thanks for Brad for putting this on again. This has been wonderful. There's been some really amazing speakers. I'm somewhat of a newbie to the hemp and cannabis world, and I've felt particularly welcome amongst hemp people and industry people. So yeah, I hope we get to stay connected to all the people who've spoken and who are about to present, because I know we've got some really cool companies coming up. I'm going to keep this brief because I like the Q&A part better. And we've got such a great investor panel that seems silly to listen to me talk. But briefly, I'd just like to speak about what I think is the most interesting thing in the, I guess, hemp sub-segment, which is the phytocannabinoids. Most people are particularly familiar with CBD. That's, the big guy. And really, it's because it's the most studied and the most accessible of the non-THC cannabinoids. And as Elaine just mentioned, there are projections from BDS, for example, of over $20 billion in market share and market value in the coming years. So that's not a secret. Everyone's heard that CBD is booming, and farmers heard that too. So they ramped up hemp production, largely because of the promise of CBD gold rush, which sounds great, except for the fact that particularly as Bob Hovigan was explaining, the infrastructure hasn't actually matured yet in an industry that essentially only began to exist in the beginning of 2019. So what's happening is, yeah, they've ramped up hemp production. 1,000-acre plus farms are popping up, but they don't have enough demand yet or enough processing ability yet. There is a lot of interesting stuff, as a lot of our speakers have talked about, in plastics and hempcrete, and using the fiber for fabrics. And those are very interesting things as well. Most of the recent explosion in growth has been the high CBD hemp crop. And unfortunately, as you can see from these news articles, a lot of it's just rotting in fields. And that's because of the big processing bottleneck. No matter how much hemp you grow, it's not going to end up in a bottle of CBD oil. There's something in between. You've got to be able to extract it. So the problem is clearly the bottleneck that's in processing. And at least the way that we see it, the solution is clearly industrial scale concentrate manufacturing. Briefly, so that everyone's on the same page as far as terminology, processing and extraction is what happens between growing and harvesting the green plant on a hemp farm, and then manufacturing that into a CBD product for the consumer. Essentially what you're doing is taking out a number of molecules that you want and leaving everything else behind. And when people say extraction, they're usually talking about the very first stage of the whole processing timeline, which is when you go from an actual plant biomass into some sort of concentrate. And a lot of times, especially, again, as some of our speakers were mentioning today, things are kind of trending towards that whole plant extract, to where some of these additional isolation techniques are not even desired by many end products, because they want the more full plant, broad spectrum. But again, no matter what end product you're doing, you got to start with extraction. You've got to take out the molecules you want out of that big green plant. So this is us. I'm Zach. As I mentioned, I have a specialty in community building and building sales teams. And my co-founder, Sean, is a PhD rocket scientist who has a lot of experience in prototyping, thermal engineering, and he has specific expertise in the cryogenic ethanol extraction process, not only in the cannabinoid space, but also in botanicals and in alcohol production. So again, we believe the solution, it's industrial scale concentrate manufacturing, and how we're going about it is the cryogenic ethanol extraction process, because not only is it quality, efficient, safe, but compared to the few other ways that might hit those categories, it's also scalable. This is, again, as some of our speakers mentioned today, bringing technology from existing industries, whether that's energy, food, pharmaceuticals, or cosmetics, and plugging those in and adapting them for phytocannabinoid extraction. One way that we're tackling this to better partner with our farms, but also to scale up without having to go from zero to a giant factory overnight, is using a modular and decentralized approach for that first stage of extraction. We can build extraction laboratories that are largely plug and play inside of shipping containers or even RV style trailers. These allows us to avoid choosing ahead of time a very large and expensive plot of real estate. Gives us some flexibility on which growing partners we want to work with. And it also lets us, not only in the hemp CBD side of things, but on the more cannabis marijuana side of things, as states open up their regulations, we can have laboratories already built on wheels that can be trucked right in and be the first people in whichever state wants to come on next. Because it is a large market, obviously there's a financial reason for us wanting to take on this challenge. As you can see, estimates of if we've got about 1,000 kilograms of normal concentration CBD hemp, we can expect margins between 100 and 250,000 from that. That depends on market conditions, but also the end product. If it's a full spectrum concentrate versus a 99% tea-free isolate. And our revenue models include both purchasing biomass, processing it, and wholesaling it to manufacturers, but also contract processing, in which case we never actually take possession of any of the hemp or the concentrate, but simply do the work and get the cash even more efficiently. Based on simply scaling up using these modular units, our projections show us eclipsing $40 million by year 3. And that's really what we're doing. Even though we're very much a technology company, we're funding it through the fact that the high margins in CBD allow us to quickly reach profitability, so that hopefully this first fundraise is the only time we have to take dilutive capital. Right now we're raising up to $1.4 million as a full equity raise. By that I mean, I know some people are doing things with like a capped ROI. That is not the case in our seed round here. We would love for our angel and VC seed investors to participate with us in what we anticipate being at least a 50x return. And the reason we need the money is largely to fabricate the equipment itself. Even though we've scaled down to those modular units, building a factory is still somewhat capital intensive. And yeah, that's all I really wanted to say on screen at least. But I'd love to hear some questions.
Thank you. Yeah, we have just under 3 minutes for that. Who on our panel has looked at this part of the supply chain that has a question? Seth. Welcome, Seth. We missed you on the introductions.
Hi, Seth.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, sorry. I got in a little, got online a little late. I was listening. We've been involved with several processor failures recently, and note that others, for example, Elemental in Kentucky, Gencana that we worked on, and other processors, specialty oil extractors in South Carolina are having a tough time. And one of the problems is that the farmers of the hemp don't have money to pay processors. So I'm kind of wondering, in terms of your overall capitalization, how far you're going to get with $1.5 million.
Sure.
One
we actually purchase biomass. That's one of the options. So farmers, we can purchase hemp biomass from farmers, so we could pay them rather than them paying us.
Okay. And then
that's part of the fundraise.
The other piece of it is, if you're going to buy the hemp and produce the products, to what extent are you going to develop a marketing department to actually sell the end product after you've produced it?
Somewhat. Currently we're allocating more resources into sales than marketing, because we'd rather go after manufacturers that can buy pretty large bulk orders, rather than, we're not trying to actually create consumer products ourselves. We don't want to compete with our customers. So it's definitely skewed more towards professional sales team than it is general marketing. We're fine if no one ever hears of our brand. The analogy I like to use is we're kind of like whoever the heck it is out there processing corn into corn syrup and selling it at Coca-Cola. I don't know his name, but he's probably a billionaire.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Thank you very much, Zach. Judges, go
I have
ahead.
a question for
Oh,
Zach.
sorry.
Sure.
Go ahead, Jay.
I like the idea of those mobile units. I think that allows you to achieve scalability quicker because you're bringing it to them.
Right.
I'm just curious about the cost of one of those units. It seems like it would be rather, you're not going to have a fleet of them at the get-go, right? So have you scoped out the cost to build a mobile unit?
Yes, we're estimating roughly $400,000, and we hope that'll go down once we, kind of get better at it and do them by scale. But yeah, the idea is to be able to start with just one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
the other thing is being able to manufacture them in a kind of central location in one of those shipping containers allows us to keep that kind of machine shop manufacturing place separate from any more, chemistry laboratory type processing facility where they don't really mix that well.
Thanks a lot, Zach.
Thank you.